Hello and welcome back. In this lesson we're going to look at functions that take other functions as parameters. These are known as higher order functions and we use them extensively in React programming. I'm just going to start off by tidying this up a little bit. I'm going to remove some code. We've written quite a lot and I want to be focused just on the code at hand for this lesson. So I'll strip this back and I'll just keep the first two functions we wrote called log and log message. And now I'll create a higher order function. I'm going to call it export function. I'll call it run func. And it'll take a parameter called func. And all it's going to do is call the function that was passed into it. So in JavaScript, if you have a function followed by parentheses, that means execute it. And to use it is extremely simple. We'll just import it into main.js and we'll say run func and we'll pass it the log function. And you can see it's worked fine. Hello Fred. So just stepping through what actually happened there. We called run func. We passed it a parameter which was log, which of course is the function up here that we imported here. So we're passing in log, run func executes, the parameter func is now equal to the function log, and when we call func we're actually calling log, and so log executes and prints out hello Fred. Now that's all fine and dandy. Things get a little messy when we want to call a function which takes a parameter. So let's get this wrong a couple of times before we get it right. The first attempt we might just say run func log message. And log message is a function that is expecting a single parameter. So when run func is called, func contains log message and it calls log message, but it supplies it with no parameters. And so when log message is run, this message parameter is not defined, and so console.log prints out what's in message, which is undefined, and we see undefined down at the bottom here. So that's failure number one. We may instead try and supply the parameter here if I pay important, let's say. Now we have seen this before where we put one function into the parameter list of another function, and if you remember, what happens is the runtime executes this function, the inner function, and it passes any results returned to the outer function. So what's happening here is log message is being called by the runtime and passing it the parameter important. So it goes off here, log message is called, this message is set to important, and it says console.log important, and we see important appear down here. This function, however, doesn't return any value at all, so this here, no value is returned, and so nothing is actually passed to run func. Run func is called with an empty parameter list. So when run func executes, func is undefined, and when we try and call a function which is func, we get an error message saying, hang on a minute, func is not a function, it's nothing at all. And so clearly that's not going to work either. Now the way we get around this is we are going to call run func and we're going to pass it an arrow function. So let's just create an arrow function and say const arrow func equals, and it's going to be an arrow function that takes no parameters. But when the arrow function is called, what it's going to do, it's going to call log message important, like that. Now, you may remember from a previous lesson, if we have an arrow function which only has a single line of code in it, we don't need the curly braces. So I can tidy this up and make it look like that. Now let's just look at this line of code up here. Run func calling log. Run func was calling a function that took no parameters. So let's do it again. Run func is going to call a function that takes no parameters, and that function is arrow func. And we'll find that all works nicely. So here, func in run func is the arrow function. It executes arrow function, and the arrow function does this. It calls log message with important, and so we see important appear down here. And just like before, we can collapse this. We don't really need this arrow func variable. We can just take the arrow function itself and put that straight into the parameter list. After all, it's exactly the same thing. And now we've reached a very nice situation where we can pass to run func a function which takes no parameters, but it calls log message with a parameter. So essentially, we found a way of getting run func to execute log message with a parameter. In this case, the parameter is important. Now this pattern of calling functions and passing them other functions which take parameters is extremely common in React programming, and you'll see this syntax over and over again where we've got these arrow function where the parameter list is empty and then we're calling something over here. So I hope that's all clear. In the next lesson we'll start looking in the browser tools at the debugger, and I'll see you there.